loss of native speaker norms? That's a question for TEFLologists. Is it better to focus on form or to focus on forms? That's a question for TEFLologists. If you use a textbook, is your classroom authentic, or should your approach be more learner-centric, from feedback to learner autonomy? We'll discuss it all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to the TEFLology Podcast, a podcast all about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
TEFL News.
For this episode's TEFL News, I'm going to talk about, I know it's your favorite topic, Matt, and it's that time of year
Was it? Okay.
where we look at the winners of the 2019 ELTons.
Oh, yeah, the Eltons, yeah.
Yeah. I think in the past we've discussed the ELTons as a thing, like what we think of it.
Twice, in fact.
Twice. So I think maybe we don't need to go over that. So just focus on looking at the winners and, you know, what they've done to become winners.
Sure. Bribery.
Deserving winners, of course. So the 2019 Elton Award ceremony was earlier this month, June 2019.
Okay.
It was the usual star-studded affair with the red carpet interviews, including interviews by a friend of the podcast, Chia Swan Chong.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah.
So friend of the podcast, that's just from our end.
It's a one-way friendship, but sure. Yeah. Friend of the podcast, people know what that means, right? It means that she's appeared on the podcast.
Yes.
I think she mutually supports what we're doing.
Okay, so I don't think there were any changes to the ELTon categories. So we're going to start with excellence in course innovation.
Okay.
Okay, this is, I guess it's a Japanese-based publisher, Atamai Books.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we talked about them
Yeah,
in the
we
past.
reviewed when we did our Halloween special, one of the Halloween specials, the now defunct.
No, we'll do one this year.
We reviewed a book by Andy Boone. Do you remember that? About zombies in Tokyo?
Yep,
It was like a choose your own adventure book. And they wrote that book or published it. Yeah.
That's right. So this is a course book. It's called Widgets Inc. Widgets Inc.
I think I've heard of a previous book possibly called Widgets.
Okay.
It's been around for like some time, but I think it's been recently
All right. Well, as we know, to be eligible for the ELTons, it has to have been published within the last year.
Yes.
or have some kind of innovation in the last 2 years.
Okay, that's
which
true.
we didn't apparently have. So.
Yeah, but we're not bitter. We're fine.
Do you know anything about Widgets Inc.?
I know it's actually, I know that one of your colleagues used to use it, Rob.
Yes, that's true.
Maybe still does.
Possibly so.
But aside from that, I believe it's a task-based learning approach textbook.
It's what they call a strong task-based approach to language learning. So I guess the whole book is structured as I guess a series of tasks, but in one big, I guess it's a role play. So students stimulate being interns at a startup company. And they, I guess, do the types of tasks that interns might do. The goals of the book, they say, are to develop communicative competence.
Sure.
Always a good thing. In practical situations, and to practice workplace-related language skills. They do these tasks individually and together. They take turns being the project manager of the team. And at the end, they create what they call resumes, CVs, I assume, and participate in authentic-seeming job interviews.
Okay.
So it's very kind of business-focused.
I guess it's business-focused, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, it seems, maybe targeted at university students who will be job hunting in their time at university. Will have to put together a CV. You're going to be going out on interviews, that sort of thing. Yeah, maybe not all necessarily, really focused on business, but
right.
So this one, the innovation in, is it teaching materials?
This is excellence in course innovation.
Right. Okay. So this one.
Why is it excellence in course innovation? Why not just course innovation or excellent courses or something? It sounds like two things.
Well, a lot of people out there are innovating in their course design, but the writers of Widgets Inc. were excellent at doing it. Would you use this kind of course book?
Depends on what the students needed.
Well, we've talked about course books before. And although I kind of came down the side of being in favour of course books, I'm now edging over to I don't like using textbooks anymore.
Yeah.
So probably not.
Okay. Yeah.
But on the basis that you don't like using textbooks, not
Also,
on the basis that it sounds like a bad textbook.
Also, being critical of the ELTons, how is awarding this award to a textbook or a course book an innovation? Surely it would be more of an innovation to not award it to a course book or a textbook.
I mean, I guess part of it is I haven't heard of a course book doing this sort of thing. I mean, I guess you could call it a course, and then the book is there to sort of guide the teachers in terms of what the course is.
Yeah, these days it's not just a book, is it? It's a whole multimedia thing. But.
And I haven't looked at the book itself. It may be that they've used this frame just to do each lesson is a grammar point, and it's it may end up being like the usual course book.
Right.
But I think it's possible that they call it a strong task-based approach. So maybe they are. Maybe if it's a well-constructed book, I think that sort of course might be good.
Yeah, I've got a question about the strong task-based thing, because so I know that in particular conceptions of task-based teaching, so Mike Long's version, one of the main kind of things that you do at the beginning is the needs analysis of the students. How can you produce a course book when the needs analysis with particular groups is so central to the approach? Yeah,
that's a good question. I mean, what I would guess that they might argue is that if it is a course for university students, that it's pretty likely that at the end of their time at university they'll be going on interviews, putting together CVs. Maybe not all, but a lot of them may be working in companies where they be part of a team and having to do these things. So maybe it's just an assumption that. Okay, moving on. Digital innovation. This went to something called Go Correct.
Okay.
Go Correct is, and I quote, a messenger-based chatbot. So it's an app. Students sign up for it, I guess, and what they get is they receive a daily conversation question. So they're sent a question. I think it's a messaging app, and then they write their answer to that question, and then a teacher corrects it and then sends them back a corrected version of their answer to the conversation question.
It's not a bot. There's a teacher involved.
As far as I can tell, it's an actual teacher.
So we are, Rob.
We're all chatbots.
And so that's new? Is it a new thing?
I guess it's a new app. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how new the concept is. What it claims, I mean, this is where it gets a little iffy. It claims it helps students unlearn, in single quotation marks, unlearn typical mistakes and increase their fluency and confidence.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, possibly writing fluency, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I trialed an app like this for Japanese learners a few years ago. I went to the company's office and they gave me a smartphone. And that wasn't a teacher, but basically you sent messages back and forth, and then people on the other end would correct your grammar. And it was pretty good. I don't know what happened to it. I can't remember what it was called, but it sounds kind of similar, except that they've got an actual teacher, as opposed to just an amateur.
The corrected version you get back, it looks a bit like a Word doc that says track changes on it, so you can see all the corrections that have been made to it.
What's the chat-iness of it? Is there like a hi, how are you kind of thing?
Not that I can tell.
Or is it you just submit your message and it?
I mean, I assume they just they send the same discussion question to everybody signed up for it.
Spam.
Right.
Yeah, kind of. And then everybody individually writes back. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure about the messenger-based chatbot part of it. Maybe those are just like buzzwords that they were told would sound good. I don't know.
That sounds interesting.
Well, I guess it's done, for looking at the image there, it looks like it's done on the smartphone. So I guess that's where that kind of comes in.
I think so, yeah.
It kind of mimics like other applications, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of students do most of their writing on smartphones anyway.
Oh, yeah. I know it.
You're right. All right. Maybe we only have time for one more. So we'll look at innovation in teacher resources.
Yes, this is where we should be winning our awards, picking them all up, scooping them up.
So this is from Cambridge Assessment English. Although the website is futurelearn.com, so they've kind of hidden a little bit the fact that it's a Cambridge assessment product. But this is online courses for teachers on how to teach online.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of courses like that, I think. I've seen quite a lot of courses like teach online kind of short courses and stuff. Yeah. So is it like how to use Skype?
I guess so, yeah. It's about, I guess, using the digital tools and resources.
Is it training people to correct that chat bot?
Exactly. Probably, yeah. Hopefully at the Elton Awards, they got together over a glass of champagne and realized what they could do.
So is there an agenda? Do you think there's an agenda here of these awards? Like, it seems like there is.
What agenda are you imagining?
Well, the past 2 awards we just talked about, there seems like there's an emphasis towards digitalizing the teacher. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Kind of moving towards that. Moving away from the teacher as a working individual in the classroom, more towards this kind of...
I mean, I guess you could argue it's just recognizing, how a lot of the teaching around the world happens these days.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's good, I guess, because, there is a lot, like, here we have classes, online sort of classes with teachers in the Philippines. So, that kind of thing does happen.
Yep.
I don't personally like the idea of doing too much teaching online, because I know that it tends to get farmed out and paid less than, classroom teaching. So I think there's, some disadvantages for people. Yeah. Do you think it's as good as classroom teaching for students?
I don't know.
I don't think it's one or the other, is it? It's things are blended these days, aren't they?
Right.
So
it's often one-to-one, which is, has its benefits.
Yeah.
And then I think, for teachers in certain areas of the world, maybe it's a lifeline in terms of, gives them work that they may not otherwise have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an online course, I think, and the focus is, they talk about it helping you understand how to adapt your face-to-face teaching skills to an online environment. Okay,
so
sounds good.
do you think that Cambridge needs another award? Like, what's the value of the British Council awarding Cambridge University Press an award?
Yeah,
like, and there's a lot of I think I saw in that list there was a lot of other individual, sort of more local kind of innovations, people doing things, and Marek, for example, Marek Kichikowiak was he was overlooked, snubbed. His award was snubbed, and arguably I think he should have won it.
Yeah, he was robbed. That's what I say. No, I think like Cambridge have a lot of money to pour into development. I mean, it's the same reason why any big business tends to innovate. But so I mean, they have the money to pour into things so they can produce innovative stuff. The question is, like you said, you've got those local things which are probably more suited to particular environments and stuff like that. But then there's a limit in that, right?
Maybe not local, more independent.
Okay.
Yeah. Which these aren't.
I think, that's a criticism that's been leveled at the ELTons over the years. But I think, I don't know, I think there is a mix of things being produced by the bigger companies and by some of the smaller independent teachers out there. So we're out of time, but just to say that the British Council Outstanding Achievement Award went to David Graddol. Former pioneer.
Yes, he was. But you did his section.
Yes. Future guest, hopefully.
Yeah.
Uncontroversial choice there, I guess. So that was this episode's TEFL News.
TEFL Cultures.
Okay, for this episode's TEFL Culture, we're going to return to a topic which we last discussed in episode 3. Do you remember the topics we discussed way back then in the dawns of prehistory?
It's coming up to 5 years ago now.
Yes. Yeah.
Episode 3.
Episode 3.
I remember episode 1. Got no memory of episode 2.
Yeah. Well, in episode 3, I did a section about evangelical Christianity in language teaching. And today I'm doing a follow-up section on that, which is based on a book. Well, it's more of a book review that I just read last week called English Teaching and Evangelical Mission, The Case of Lighthouse School, which is here. You can... That's the pages, listeners.
ASMR.
Yeah.
Nice.
This is by Bill Johnston. And this is an ethnographic study into a particular evangelical school in Poland. I just thought I'd basically go through the book. Maybe we could talk about some of our reactions to it.
Yep.
So Johnson starts off by situating his work within the broader discussion around evangelical Christians and language teaching, which has been going on. And he notes that a few years ago there were a lot of a small number of critical articles coming out by people like Julian Edge, Alistair Pennycook, which were connecting evangelical teaching with missionary work and with kind of US imperialism in terms of the Iraq War and that kind of thing. And he also noted that there are kind of two different worlds in terms of writing about evangelical language teaching. So you've got the people writing about it as outsiders, and then you've also got an almost completely unknown to us, perhaps, publishing industry, which is focusing on books produced entirely for evangelical language teachers.
Oh, right.
And apparently there are some people who live kind of a double life, writing very well-regarded mainstream TESOL books and then also writing extremely popular evangelical teaching books. And so Johnston engaged in a study a few years ago, I think back in 2007 or so, where he tried to get away from this kind of, judgmental approach to writing about the work of evangelical Christians, and actually went and spoke to some of these people and said, what are you doing and why are you doing it, and tried to get kind of an insider's perspective on it. He himself is not a Christian, he's an atheist, but he wants to understand what they do on their terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he decided to go and investigate evangelical Christian teaching in Poland, and particularly at one school called Lighthouse School, which was connected to an evangelical church there. Mm-hmm. He chose Poland because he thought it was quite an interesting kind of environment. It's a very, very Catholic country in the first place, so he wasn't sure what it meant to be kind of trying to win people over from one form of Christianity to another, and how that would go down, and how the students would see that work in relation to the teaching. So what I found particularly interesting about the book is the kind of classroom vignettes. He spent an entire year in the school within, he describes it very well. It's an excellent piece of ethnographic writing, actually. And he describes these kinds of classes as they go on, and, the varied skill of the teachers and how they kind of integrate the evangelical work into the lesson. So for the most part, the lessons are kind of regular language lessons. They have their own materials that they've made, which are based on things like Robinson Crusoe. And then they've got like grammar and vocabulary focus. And then the teachers will kind of break away from the lesson structure to do a bit of kind of improvisational sermonizing on some theme that's come up in the lessons to the students. And the students are from varied backgrounds and that kind of thing.
Sorry. Yeah. What year are we? Are we talking about like modern day?
Yes, yeah. This is about 2013, 2014, I think.
Okay.
And so you get these kind of glimpses of the teachers who very skillfully weave the evangelical material into their lesson plans, and then also the perspectives of the learners who see, for the most part, they don't really see this as separate from their own faith. So they just see, they're talking about God. Well, we believe in God, and they believe in God, and we're all Christians, and everything's framed in such a way that, it doesn't cause any clashes with their own faith. Yeah.
So the students they're not there to learn about evangelical Christianity.
Not particularly, no. I mean, so he makes a point of saying that in the city where the school is housed, there's actually quite a lot of competition for language schools. The students can go to secular language schools if they choose, but they choose to go to this one because they like the atmosphere and they like the teachers. Yeah.
But so the title of the book says it's a mission. So the goal of the school is to convert the students?
Well, so that's the question, isn't it? I mean, that's what they'd like to happen, I think.
Okay.
But it actually seems that there's a clash between what different people want. So some people seem to see the education itself as their mission, whereas others want to get numbers. And sometimes there's a clash between the schools and the church. So some churches want numbers, and some members of the churches actually don't. They just want more community engagement and things like that. it seems there's a lot of conflicting perspectives on what the goal is of what they're doing. But yeah, it seems like in the classroom, the main focus is on teaching, but then with this sermonizing sort of slipped in. Yeah, it's a very interesting picture of a classroom, I think.
Does he say anything about how the teachers are trained?
Yeah, so some of them have relatively good training. Some of them have no training.
Okay.
And in fact, so that was another point. The training and the teaching skill did seem to be placed above the ability to missionize, if that's a word. So there was one teacher who was just not very good at teaching because of a lack of training, and was sent away, but was let go from the mission. Whereas another one who was very, very skilled at, there were problems with the teaching because she wasn't extremely highly trained, but she had experience, and she managed to teach well, and also kind of seamlessly fit in all the different strands of the student's life and the mission work and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
What does the book say about the learner's development of beliefs and or their language?
Well, so
do they kind of match up, or?
I mean, it actually doesn't talk that much about their language development, apart from the fact that they all can sort of communicate.
Yeah.
And it's more focused on the teacher's classroom ability. In terms of their spiritual development, I think you get the sense that the school has hopes for the students, which the students aren't that interested in. So there's one particular student who features quite heavily throughout the book, and she seems to be quite central to the life of the school. And the teachers seem to give the impression that they're expecting her to convert, but when he interviewed her, she said, "No, I haven't even really thought about it. I just enjoy my lessons, and I like the religious aspect of it, but I don't see it as being contrary to what I already believe. So I don't see any reason to convert."
How does this situation compare to some other because I'd be more aware of evangelical teachers that are kind of, what's the correct term, that are in the wild and kind of, do you know what I mean? They're not working within a school.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
They're their own independent evangelical kind of, on their own mission.
Okay.
Well, that's more what we talked about back in episode 3.
Yeah,
I remember back in that episode we said that it obviously depends on the teachers, but for most evangelical teachers, evangelicalism is just one part of their identity, right? And so I think the quote was from a guy called Paul Wicking, who said that for these teachers, the way they express their faith is by doing as conscientious and as good a job at being an educator as they can.
Yeah, I guess, and then there's the other extreme, which is where evangelical teachers would be a clear example, but teachers who have a clear agenda, something that they want to get across to the students or want the students to believe.
Yes, in this book, Johnston references earlier debates about this, and there's a book which I've ordered, it didn't arrive in time for this section, unfortunately, which is called Christian and Critical Educators in Dialogue. And so some of the critiques against people like Pennycook from evangelical writers has been that those people also have an agenda. The critical educators also have an agenda. It's not a religious agenda, but it's a political agenda. And so there's I really wish I'd had the book in time for this, but there is a book where these two sides kind of thrash it out. And what I think is interesting about Johnson is that he's not trying to take a side. He's just trying to understand these people on their terms and understand how they operate. He sees this as like a contribution, I think, to the ongoing dialogue about these teachers, which I think are not very well understood by most people in the profession.
I think it would be untrue to not acknowledge that English teaching does have some sort of religious background to it.
How do you mean?
I mean, maybe not to all of us, but it definitely does. Religion has played a part in the development of English around the world. And I'm sure that's taken teachers to other places as well. Right.
Well, I think that's where a lot of the early criticisms of mission work being combined with language teaching come from. But apparently one thing that comes up in those, as I said, there's that separate world of evangelical language teaching material. Apparently one thing that comes up in there very often is the kind of admonition to those teachers to put the teaching first and the evangelical stuff second, as the secondary consideration to your responsibility to be teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, we've spoken to people for this podcast and sort of been aware of, what people say in other forums. For a lot of language teachers, maybe it's considered quite a liberal profession. And people are sort of open about the fact that they think that it's, their duty or it's part of their job as a language teacher to sort of spread those liberal values. So it seems like it's maybe kind of shifted the other way.
Right. Yeah, and again, I think that... So this is a discussion we had quite recently, actually. I think what a critical educator would say is that if you're not teaching critically, you're still pushing an agenda. You're just not aware of it. You're pushing the agenda of whatever the status quo is. So I think we have to be aware that we're all, whether we're critical educators or Christian educators or whatever, we've all got some kind of agenda, whether we're conscious of the agenda or not. I think in a way it's actually quite good that these evangelical teachers, they're not really hiding who they are. They're aware of their agenda, and the students are pretty aware of that as well. So I think it's something that perhaps more people need to be doing.
What, be evangelical?
Be aware of their agenda. Be aware of their biases. Very much not.
Right.
So I think it's an interesting study. I think it's worth reading if you are interested in that side of things, and if you want to get an insider perspective on what evangelical teachers are doing and what happens in those mission schools. So that's the book English Teaching and Evangelical Mission: The Case of Lighthouse School by Bill Johnston, published by Multilingual Matters.
TEFL Pioneers.
So today I'm going to be talking about today's TEFL pioneer, David Graddol. A quote about David Graddol. So this is from the EL Gazette, who recently wrote about him. He was the man who saw the future of English. It's a nice quote from him. And that very much describes his contribution to our field. So I'll talk about his work today. So first, his background. So as some of you may know, David Graddol sadly died earlier this year. In fact, March the 1st of this year. Fairly recent as we record this, at the age of 66. And I'll talk a little bit about his background. So he first graduated from the University of York with a BA in Language and Linguistics in 1975. He then went on to complete a sociology degree, and that was in 1983. And this was followed finally by a PhD from the University of Stockholm as well. I'm not sure about this. So he was a faculty member at the Open University in the UK, and he first started there in 1979. Now, if he got his BA in 1975, that's quite soon after.
Oh, you could do that back in those days.
Yeah. I'm not disputing that he did, but no, that just kind of stood out for me as well. So he was at the Open University, and in recent years he's also been working in Hong Kong Polytechnic University. I think we have a colleague who is currently studying there.
I believe so.
Yeah. So hello to you.
He's not listening.
If you're listening.
Busy doing his PhD.
That's true, yeah. From 2008 to 2012, he was a co-editor of the Cambridge University Press's English Today journal. Are you aware of that journal?
Yes.
What sort of journal is it? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't read it very much, but I was cited in it once.
Oh, right, okay. It's a journal that broadly deals with styles, usages, and other aspects of different world Englishes. And this is very much Graddol's contributions and interests. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Just before we get onto his contributions, he also produced and presented a series of talks for the BBC World Service about global and world Englishes in the early 2000s. So he's quite a well-known kind of household name, relatively speaking.
Within our field, he's a household name.
Yeah, sure, yeah, definitely, yeah. And I'm surprised we haven't talked about him previously, to be honest. He also directed The English Company, which produced the 1997 research document for the British Council titled The Future of English, ? Which we'll talk about today. And he also had triplets. He had 3 daughters.
Oh, wow.
That's quite
rare,
a nice little fact there.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about his contributions. So I'll talk about 2 of his main contributions. So in 1997, The Future of English, ? was produced for the British Council. The book is described as a practical briefing document written for educationists, politicians, managers, and really any decision maker or planning team with a professional interest in the development of English worldwide. And the book took stock of the present position of English at the time in the world and asked whether the status can expect to remain unchanged during the coming decades. So this was 1997, so that's, 22 years ago it was written. So for example, some of the questions he explored were how many people will speak English in the year 2050? I don't have the answer to that. But, what roles will English play in the future? What effects will economic globalization have on the demand for English? And whether the internet is the electronic flagship of global English.
And what was the question again? How was it phrased?
Whether the internet is the electronic flagship of global English. So I guess whether the internet kind of promotes global English, I guess.
In a way that I kind of agree. The question is, so much of the media is on the internet, like even traditional media, TV shows and that sort of thing, that it's sort of hard to distinguish.
So the book is very kind of introductory. So he begins by kind of painting a picture of English with regard to its history, its legacy, and perceived hierarchies as well. He then puts forward his approach for predicting trends and certain scenarios and what he sees, his kind of futurology position and how he kind of wants to set up the argument. This is then followed with observations on the roles of English with regard to global trends, such as changing demographics and economical situations, as well as the impacts of English on things like the internet, working environments, and youth culture. And then the book culminates with predictions about future developments of English. So Graddol hypothesized in 1997 that the future of English will be a complex and plural one. The language will grow in usage and variety, yet simultaneously diminish in relative global importance. So we may find the hegemony of English replaced by an oligarchy of languages, including Spanish and Chinese. To put it in economic terms, the size of the global market for the English language may increase in absolute terms, but its market share will probably fall. So this was said in 1997. What do you think about that hypothesis?
Well, I mean, he was saying this about 2050. Right. This is
I think that was the kind of the end kind of prediction. Okay. But over that time, from 1997 until 2050.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if that's true. Do you think it's the case that? I mean, it seems to me like it's gone maybe a little bit more in the direction. Maybe there's a bit of pushback now from China or Chinese, but it seems like it's gone more in the other direction. That there's like more of a push towards English and a reduction of other languages.
Yeah. I always thought that a turning point or something that we would notice in terms of the evolution of English or how English develops is when other languages, influences of other languages became more obvious in the English that we, are confronted with, basically.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if that's happened yet. Maybe it has a little bit. Maybe some of the youth culture slang and stuff is influenced by the languages. But I don't feel like I've come up against it yet, or
No, well, I mean that's kind of an issue of power relations, that generally when two languages come into contact, the more powerful one gives elements to the less powerful one. So it would be surprising to me if that did happen. I mean,
although one interesting thing, maybe actually one exception I can think of, and it's a very sort of, it's barely an example, but I think it is one, is what I've noticed as somebody who kind of moved back and forth between American culture and British culture all my life. It was always very clear when aspects of American English came into British English. But what I've noticed, and it basically never happened the other way around, but I think what I've noticed over the last 10, 15 years is that it's starting to happen more. More Britishisms get adopted into American English. And I assume that's because of, internet and British TV, because of the internet and things like that, British TV shows can become more popular in the States.
Right. And of course, I mean, you can think about, obviously a little bit different, but in the colonial period, lots of words from like Indian English ended up in British English.
Yeah.
Like, I guess if there's a useful borrowing, people are going to borrow it.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, some of the points you raised there. So by no means was this book the first of its kind to kind of make these kind of observations. But Andrew Moody, who's the current editor of English Today, said that Graddol's open-minded and vigilant search for the new and overlooked sources of data, that being historical, economic and sociological, is what justifies this approach to English studies. So I think it was kind of one of the first of its kind to bring these kind of other points together, some of which you kind of mentioned, maybe.
Right. I mean, what distinguishes... So this was 1997.
Yeah.
I mean, David Graddol wrote English as a Global Language at about the same time.
Yeah.
And there were publications about English as an international, like all that kind of stuff before that. So is what distinguishes his work from other works the futurological approach, the predictive aspect of it?
Yeah.
So he's kind of taking economic and historical trends and abstracting that into the future. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And that whole question mark there is that he's speculating, but, scientifically speculating, I guess, using different types of data, I guess, yeah. So in 2006, he, almost a decade after the first book, he wrote a new book called English Next. So this was again commissioned by the British Council and written by David Graddol. This report builds on the 1997 analysis, but is heavily focused on looking at a number of technological and societal developments that had become more prominent in the 9 years since the last report. So there was a lot of changes to the point a new book had to be made. So I guess this idea of the internet probably changed a lot in the second book. So most notably, one of the most notable changes was the growing international networks of communication and the adoption of English as a global teaching medium. These were some of the two big changes that he talked about.
Right.
In English Next, he challenged dominant ways of thinking about the global spread of English and offered some innovative thinking about the future of English as a global language as opposed to EFL. So he kind of sets up that distinction in the book.
It's a good distinction. People should write books with that in the title of the book.
Yes, they should, Rob, yes. I was going to get to that. So, for example, he asks the ever-present question, who is a native speaker? That's one of the questions he explores, and explores some of the problems around the native speaker label. He discusses a new world orthodoxy of children learning English from primary school level and speculates about the decline of the English language as a second language in the future.
Yeah. So again, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what he's doing here is popularizing things that had already been written about. So like the native speaker, Alan Davies wrote about that. Like his book was 1991, and then the updated version was 2003.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's taking arguments that are already there, but then kind of putting them together and making them available for a more sort of general audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the first book. It was written for different kinds of stakeholders, so it's very broad. It's very general. The chapters themselves are only like 2 or 3 pages long, so it's very accessible.
So this was for the British Council. Was it designed to be read by teachers, by school managers, by the general public? Like who you said like it for various stakeholders, but who was the intended audience when it was written?
I think like managers, policymakers, like people that work in the education industry.
Right. So I was going to say 2-3 pages. It sounds a bit like a brief. That you'd give to someone before they go to a meeting.
And this one was slightly longer. This was a bit longer than 60 pages long. I think it was over 100 pages. So
it's a lot of pages.
It's a lot of pages indeed. Just to move on to his other contribution. So in more recent years, he wrote special issue follow-up reports looking at the settings of English in China and India, again with the British Council. So a whole book's just dedicated to those nations. He also did some work with a mutual colleague of ours, Rob. I don't know if you remember Anna Daniel Betts.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember her?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, she used to work in Japan. About English and urban landscapes, particularly along the physical border and linguistic divide of China and Hong Kong. Looking at kind of road signage and kind of station signs and that kind of thing. And he, of course, has written more widely than the British Council publications as well. And he's also done a lot of press work as well.
I was going to ask, actually, about the British Council connection. If you've got an organisation like the British Council, which is, hinged on the teaching of English and on the teaching of a particular type of English, to what extent do you think the influence of the British Council affected the conclusions that he drew in his report.
I was thinking that on the way here. I was thinking surely it would be a bit contradictory, perhaps. Maybe if I go back and read it, you will find kind of hints of British Council kind of worthy kind of approaches in there, I think. Maybe. I wonder to what extent it was written for the British Council as opposed to by the British Council.
Yes. Was it, when we talked about L.A. Hill, his article Neutral English, that reads, as Richard Smith pointed out to me, that reads very much like it was written as an internal British Council report.
Right, okay.
So I think the British Council's been on this for a very long time. In 1978, they did a publication about international English. So they've been developing thought about this for a long time. I wonder where his work fits into that kind of...
Yeah.
But so you've both worked for the British Council.
Yeah.
Do you think that those ideas do kind of filter down to the classroom in terms of the type of lessons that are taught?
No, but I don't think it matters because, the types of lessons that are taught, that's not really what... Like Matt said, it sounds like this is more for policymakers. Policymakers don't care so much, I guess, about what's happening in the classroom. It's more about expansion markets and things like that, maybe.
Finally, I think one of his other services was to open access and the spirit of making academic works as open, free and accessible as possible. So Andrew Moody, again, states that he was fiercely committed to fair editorial practices and did not discriminate against emerging scholars internationally. And that he would want every scholar working in the field of world Englishes and applied linguistics to know that his own work is accessible and free for all those who are interested. Yeah, so I think that's kind of summarised David Graddol's contribution. So that was today's pioneer, TEFL pioneer, David Graddol.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
If you'd like to listen to more episodes, they're available on the website. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can send an email to TEFLology@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter @TEFLology. The website is TEFLology-podcast.com, where all our previous episodes are archived. We also have a Facebook page, and we have an ebook which is available on Amazon, titled Podcasting and Professional Development, a Guide for English Language Teachers. So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye.